Peter, President Trump has not been shy about saying very directly there will be consequences for Republicans who don't fall in line. Beyond that, what's he doing?
Well, you can see the West Wing here. That's the Marine Guard out front, which means the president is here in the West Wing. We believe he's taking meetings. We know over the course of the day he'll be meeting with some of those moderates, as Melanie noted, also meeting with some of the Freedom Caucus members here. But the bottom line for the president is this really is the biggest test of his presidential power in this second term to date right now. He succeeded in getting lawmakers, Republicans, to sort of bow to his every move to this point so far. They have approved his nominees. They cheered his overhaul of the federal bureaucracy as a function of DOGE under the leadership then of Elon Musk. And now it's his signature legislative priority, this one big, beautiful bill, as he describes it right now. The president posting a series of posts on this issue earlier today. You saw the Speaker, Mike Johnson, saying that he's going to use the cards he's been dealt as best he can. The president views that game of cards a little bit differently. He wrote, "Republicans, don't let the radical left Democrats push you around. We've got all the cards, and we are going to use them." So the president, who has really succeeded in at times bullying and threatening lawmakers, certainly the Democrats, Republicans as well, is pushing ahead with the hopes that this can be resolved by July 4th, by the end of this week, which will allow him to celebrate a major historic victory in his view here. But for a lot of Republican lawmakers, they're the ones who face the real political peril, as we've been discussing here, Chris. These lawmakers are the ones facing midterms coming up this fall if they vote against the president, like Thomas Massie has suggested of Kentucky. President Trump has said anybody I endorse would beat Massie by 25 points, so they face the risk of the president's bully pulpit, as it were, to try to defeat them in a primary. The flip to that is if they vote against things that may harm some of their own constituents, with many constituents in rural communities among those who could be affected by cuts to Medicaid, they could face the political peril in terms of the view of their constituents back at home. So it is a perilous position for a lot of those Republican lawmakers, but perhaps the best demonstration, again, to this point, of the strength of this power over the Republican Party in this second term.
Without a doubt. Peter, thank you for that. So, Brendan, take us behind the scenes. Yesterday, we saw how a deal could be made with Senator Lisa Murkowski. What are the conversations like, do you imagine, between Speaker Johnson or the president and these holdouts today? Is there something he can offer to hardliners?
Well, Johnson certainly has a tougher time than Thune. I mean, as Melanie laid out, they can't change the bill at this point. And what Thune had the ability to do was give Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, something, anything to make her feel better about it. They can't do that here. Any changes would delay this, not just for a few days, but I think quite significantly, perhaps weeks. I think what they're going to end up doing is one, trying to, I think, go a little bit under the surface of what these conservatives are saying. I have a hard time taking too seriously some of these fiscal conservative concerns about what the Senate has done. I can tell you that House members are just generally allergic to anything the Senate does, regardless of what the substance is. If you're a fiscal conservative, the Senate is cutting Medicaid further than what the House did. The Senate is cutting taxes further than what the House did. Their concern is the overall cost, but I have a hard time seeing a lot of these fiscal conservatives going to the White House and telling Donald Trump that they want to cut taxes less or try to convince him to cut Medicaid even more. None of those things are going to happen. Now, will they promise them something next time? Sure. I mean, they've been doing that every step of the way. There's always, we'll get them next time. I don't think that they should delude themselves into thinking that there is a rainbow, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow at some point where we're finally going to be able to balance the budget. I mean, if there were spending cuts that could pass, they would be in here. They just can't. So some of this is just people coming to reality. I don't think they're going to be able to get to that reality today because this is a lot for them to swallow. But they're going to need to set aside their pride. And I'm guessing that Mike Johnson's strategy.
But is it pride or is it principle?
Certainly, it's potentially principle. But again, these House members already voted for a bill that cut less spending. They already voted for a bill that cut taxes significantly. I don't think that there is a substantive issue at play here. I think this is House members not liking that the Senate did something different and feeling like they need to express themselves. So I don't think that's going to get them very far. I don't think that's a good enough argument to win over Donald Trump. And I think Donald Trump's going to lean on them and ultimately most, if not all of them, are going to break.
So speaking of leaning, Basil, the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, just said basically game on.
Yeah.
Like, we're keeping this up. We're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep explaining to the American people what's going on here. But of course, Democrats can't control the outcome. So can they seize this moment in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and two things with that. The first is the more time goes by as this debate continues and there are more holdouts and people start expressing concern about whether they should or should not vote for it, it gives Democrats an opportunity to chime in and say, this is why this bill is horrible. It affects so many more Americans than perhaps previously thought. They have the opportunity to take the town halls that Republicans won't do and go into those rural communities because, of course, it's really important to contest everywhere. So even if it's not friendly territory to Democrats, it's an opening for Democrats to talk about why this bill is bad. The other point, which is important in my view, is that as many people talk about Lisa Murkowski and her vote, remember, it was Senator Murkowski who in April said, we're all afraid. So the question then, we're talking about Donald Trump and his retaliation.
And what Peter just reported.
Right. So the question then becomes, who are these members going to be more afraid of, Donald Trump or their actual constituents? And it's the job of Democrats to make them more afraid of their constituents than Donald Trump. I don't know if that changes the calculus at the end of the day with respect to the bill, but it may change Democrats' election outcomes in the midterms.
Brendan, every time Speaker Johnson has been up against the wall, and you've known what it is to work for a speaker who's up against the wall, but he's come out on the other side, right? And I'm wondering here if you see that for Speaker Johnson, and I don't just mean does this pass in some form, does he get out of this with the Republican Party as minimally scathed as can be expected given what's in this bill?
I mean, that's more of a question for Democrats, really. I think Republicans to this point have gotten away with this. I don't mean to say gotten away, but there's been very little political price for how unpopular this bill is at this point. People are simply not paying attention to it in a way that normally I'm used to. You know, when we were going through the healthcare repeal and replace debate of 2017, we were getting our teeth kicked in every single day. It was really bad, and it ultimately led to us losing the House. Democrats, yeah, they're on the floor focused on it now, but to date, they've been much more animated about immigration, much more animated about Elon Musk and Doge and just whatever Donald Trump was doing that day. The public awareness of this bill is far lower than you would have expected, and that's a benefit, I think, for Republicans. Yeah, there's a lot for a vulnerable Republican to be concerned about. Medicaid cuts, we've never cut health care this significantly in American history. So there's a lot for them to be afraid of, but that's ultimately a question of whether Democrats are able to actually focus on this and not chase whatever the shiny object of Donald Trump is that day.
Yeah, and we're always looking at, I guess, Basil, the middle, right? The folks in the middle who could go either way. Democrats have consistently said that Donald Trump doesn't really know what's in this bill, his big, beautiful bill. But let me play some of the comments he's made because he has been on message.
We really were very, very cognizant of three things. Social Security, we're going to take care of it beautifully. Medicare and Medicaid. We're cutting $1.7 trillion in this bill, and you're not going to feel any of it. And your Medicaid is left alone. It's left the same. Your Medicare and your Social Security are strengthened. We're not cutting.
To Brendan's point, does that stick more in those folks' brains than what the Democrats have been saying? That's the key question, right?
Well, with a core group of Trump supporters, yeah, they're going to take anything that he says and run with it. But the reality is, I think many Americans are waking up to the fact that they may have to wrestle with losing their health care because Medicaid gets cut. And they're going to have to plan for that. They're going to have to plan for what happens if their SNAP food stamps get cut, because that affects not just adults, it also affects children. In K-12, it affects children in college. Those Medicaid cuts impacts whether or not some of those young people who may have mental health concerns or who are disabled lose that coverage. Those aren't just, and there is a sort of a 10-year sort of horizon that some of these cuts go into effect. But the reality is it can affect people today once this bill is passed. So that's what Democrats have to continue to focus on. And with that sliver of Americans who may not register as Democrat or Republican or who are independent, all the reports and polling show that Donald Trump is losing support among that group. So it's important that Democrats keep their foot on the gas.